Hello and welcome to this week's episode of myNewsWrap. This week quite some things happened, especially in the area of the SAP with the announcement of Rise with SAP, but also some other stuff on a more technical ground, so to say. Okay, let's switch to the news. What do we have this week? Well, I think this week was dominated by the announcement of SAP at a quite big event that they pushed through social media concerning the Rise with SAP offering. I referenced the landing page within my show notes, so you can take a look at that one from there. And I also referenced quite some links to analysts' reports about their opinion on Rise with SAP. Basically, all the information that you need to get a first glance at this program is available from the landing page. And there is, first of all, a description what's in there. So basically, it's all about making the business transformation more suitable for customers, easier for customers, putting into that mix some ingredients, starting with business process intelligence, doing the technical migrations via services of partners and SAP themselves, and then building the intelligent enterprise based on an infrastructure layer that is provided by the cloud providers like AWS, Azure, or Alibaba or Google. And then building up the platform. What's interesting is that you have the S/4HANA cloud offering. I'm still not sure if this is the private cloud, the public cloud, or however it's named now. You have in there what absolutely makes sense, the SAP Business Technology Platform, including some consumption credits. So you have this Cloud Platform Enterprise Agreement, how it's called, in order to leverage the options of side-by-side extensibility. And you also have in there the SAP Business Network Starter Pack, which basically, I guess, means that Repo is included. And this complete bundle is now Rise with SAP. You also have all the videos that have been broadcasted on Wednesday. Except for the analysts Q&A. That would have been, from my perspective, a quite interesting video, but they are holding it back at the moment. However, you have the keynote of Christian Klein, you have the Q&A with Christian Klein, you have contributions by Thomas Saueressig, by Jürgen Müller, and by Luka Mucic, so by all the main members of the board, on the different areas like S4, like business technology platform, and so on. As a kind of disclaimer or warning, the target audience for those videos are not developers. Let's put it that way. So it resembled a bit to a quite salesy event on Wednesday. So looking through the page and reading through the opinions of the analysts, I think is, from a developer perspective, more beneficial than watching all the videos, but that's just my opinion. Now, having said that, Martin Fischer was already quite fast and recorded an episode with my also most beloved contributor to the CoffeeCon radio, namely the analyst from Constellation R, Holger Müller. The episode is out now since 2 hours as I'm recording this. I haven't yet listened to it, but I'm quite sure, nearly 100%, that this is great, and we will get some interesting insights from different angles on this Rise with SAP topic. So this is something on my to listen to list. Now there have been some other announcements within the area of SAP. They acquired or are acquiring within the first quarter of 2021 the process intelligence company Signavio, which plays an important role in the area of business intelligence in RISE with SAP. So I think this is kind of the central hub when it comes to business insights and process mining, which is kind of a first step in the RISE with SAP journey. From my perspective, there are two questions that arise. Point one, what will Celonis do? Because this was kind of not too cool for Celonis, which was a very prominent partner in that area. And the second question that arises in my head is, acquiring this company means the backlog that they have for integrating third-party tools into the overall suite, the intelligence suite of SAP now got another entry. And you have an overlap because Signavio also has some business process engine functionality. So I would really be interested to see where then the workflow services and the workflow bundle of SAP Cloud Platform will go to. Let's see what the upcoming weeks and months will tell us in that area. Now, one last more or less, let's say, political announcement, which touches the SAP Cloud Platform, is a renaming. There is a blog post and also a news article on news.sap.com by Jürgen Müller, CTO of SAP. And he says in one section that they want to reduce the confusion that SAP caused due to the naming of the Business Technology Platform, SAP Cloud Platform, and so on. And they are now sunsetting the term SAP Cloud Platform. So this term will no longer be used in communication and product names and so on and so forth. It will not be directly replaced by Business Technology Platform because the Business Technology Platform comprises more components than just the SAP Cloud Platform. But it means that several services will be rebranded, not reblended. For example, the SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite becomes the SAP Integration Suite. So no more filling words in between with respect to the platform it's running on. I think that's important because now a lot of things have to be changed. And for those who are working in the technical area, there is no change. So there is no sunsetting of any services or something like that. It's really just sunsetting of the product name itself. With that said, let's switch to the SAP Cloud Platform area. There was one news that is interesting for folks working on the SAP Cloud Platform. A new release of the SAP App Router was published on NPM, which has a new user API on board. So if you're working with the App Router, which you probably do, especially in the Cloud Foundry area, there is a new user API service in there that you can use now. Okay. There is another blog post that came across my timeline on Twitter with respect to making use of the enterprise messaging service on SAP Cloud Platform. So I think I will stick to that term. I will not sunset it. Building S4HANA on-prem extensions using the enterprise message service and Node. I think that's a quite nice blog post about combining those two words. So I think that's a quite common scenario that we will face in the upcoming years. No matter how much SAP will push RISE with SAP from my personal perspective. And that's combining the on-premise world with S4HANA with the cloud world and making use of this enterprise messaging service. So this is a quite nice write-up on what to do, on how to do things, setting up the enterprise message service, setting up or preparing the S4HANA system and so on. So that's a nice read. Then we're coming to the Cloud Application Programming Model. There is really a lot of traffic from the community with respect to the Cloud Application Programming Model. There is one blog post about using the Cloud Application Programming Model in conjunction with WebSockets. So the blog post is called CAP WebSockets, so I think it's quite clear what's in there or what's to expect. So what is described here is an application that makes use of WebSockets in order to notify users on a team event. So it's a real-time application which makes use of WebSockets, and for the application itself, the Cloud Application Programming Model framework is used. And it's a cool write-up on how to make use of this stuff together, including also the UI5 app part, so that the message toast, which represents this message from the WebSocket, is displayed. Then we have another contribution from the CAP ecosystem by a new member to the SAP community, who is a student of Christian Drum, who's not that young member of the SAP community, with respect to the contributions to the SAP community, of course. And this blog post describes the usage of the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model with the SAP Business Application Studio, using a SAP Fiori UI, which was, I think, a project at the university that they could do. And this is a very, very concise write-up on what the application is about, how it's structured, how it's used in the Business Application Studio, and how it's structured. So really, really nice write-up, very, very detailed, with a lot of screenshots, with a lot of explanations, and all the stuff is also available on GitHub. Okay, then let's switch to kind of Kyma as a segue. There is one blog post by Marius Obert comparing the CLIs for Cloud Foundry and Kyma that's stated in the headline. It's comparing Cloud Foundry and kubectl. So it's not the Kyma CLI that is described here or compared, which would not be fair from my perspective, but it's Cloud Foundry and the kubectl CLI. It's kind of a bit of a look behind the curtains, what you can do with those CLIs, how you can extend them, how they do authentication and such things. If you're interested in that and want to take a look behind the curtain, highly recommend it. And then there is one further blog post about Kyma by Sudeep Ghosh, who developed a machine learning model and ran it on Kyma. Putting that, it's a two-part blog post about an enterprise AI extension. And yeah, it's a description on how to get the stuff running on Kyma. It's a Python-based application. I mean, with Kyma, it does not care about the runtime. Just put the Docker file in there. Also quite extensive post on how to build the app and how to deploy it and run it on Kyma. Very nice read. Now switching to the Microsoft part of the house. As you know, Microsoft has a shifted fiscal year. So they are now in the Q2, in the second quarter of the fiscal year. And well, they of course announced their revenues, and they are huge, as expected, and they are heavily boosted by the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, with all the home office and remote work. I just referenced that post because I think it's interesting, especially when you take a look at the collaboration of SAP and Microsoft, and where the biggest revenue streams are in the Microsoft area. Of course, it's Teams, so no surprise that with Teams, which is kind of the first pillar for the collaboration roadmap between SAP and Microsoft. Then there is also one more general announcement that's not brand new, that was released on the 21st of January by the German-speaking user group, DSAG. They publish an investment report each year where they ask the customers of SAP, where do they see their spendings, where do they see their investments in the year 2021. And there is one very interesting news. I mean, the focus is S/4HANA, of course. There is one very interesting news about Azure, because they also always ask about the application platforms. So yearly the platform as a service usage. How do the companies that are members of DSAG want to spend money with respect to using cloud platforms as an application platform? And here, the first year since I think 3 years, Microsoft Azure is on the very first place. And then there is the SAP Business Technology Platform on the second place. So that is quite interesting. And what's also quite interesting is that Amazon Web Services is quite left behind with the investments. So obviously, at least in the German-speaking market, the combination of SAP and Microsoft really heavily resonates with customers. Good news for those who are listening to this podcast, because I think you have some favor with respect to the cloud platform, namely Azure. Now let's switch to the serverless news. There is one announcement for those who like to work with Python in Azure Functions. So there is Python 3.9 now available in public preview, so you can use that for your Azure Functions. It's available for local development. It's available for all Azure function plans in the Azure Cloud. As there is, as you already know, Node 14, which is also in public preview. Then there are two blog posts about the usage of Azure Functions. The first one is focusing on infrastructure, ops topic, which is combining a Stream Deck, webhook, and Azure PowerShell functions in order to spin up and spin down virtual machines or computers in Azure based on the tags that they have. So that's really, really cool. What's possible, and how I think Azure Functions with their PowerShell flavor can help you when it comes to operations. And there is another blog post on which uses Azure Functions also. Scenario is you have a YouTube channel, you upload a video, and you want to kind of broadcast that to different social media streams. And this blog post describes how you can automate that, making use of the PubSub protocol of YouTube, Azure Functions, and Cloud Events and Azure Event Grid in order to spread the news. Also quite nice read, quite extensive description on what you have to do. Also in the different parts like YouTube in order to get this so-called web sub access. Then one area that's kind of linked to Azure Functions, that's Kyma, which is the scaling solution for Kubernetes for Azure Functions. If you want to deploy them to Kubernetes, there is a new release out there. It's 2.1.0. 2.1.0, yeah, I was right. With quite some news and highlights, what's supported with respect to protocols, with respect to authentication in the Kubernetes cluster, different sources of how to trigger functions. So if you're working with Kyma, I think take a look at that. Of course, also a lot of bug fixes in there. Then we go to the low-code area of serverless, namely logic apps. There is an update in the documentation about Azure Logic Apps and the SAP connector area. So this is currently something that is really heavily improving with each iteration. And obviously the SAP connector area is an important area for Azure Logic Apps. So they are trying to improve the documentation area really heavily. And this is now another milestone that was announced this week. Then from a, let's say, mixed area of information with respect to Microsoft, I have one blog post about Kubernetes Canary deployments, making use of GitHub Actions. That's a very nice blog post because this blog post also explains what's the difference between Canary, rolling updates, blue-green deployments, how you can make use of that Canary deployment with GitHub Actions. And also there is at the end of the blog post some summary and some thoughts about, is GitHub Actions already mature enough in order to make that happen, or are there better ways in order to do that? So really a nice discussion about that topic. Then there is one project, to be honest, I don't know if it's brand new, but it crossed my timeline this week. And that's Project Bonsai, which kind of nicely fits into the collaboration area between SAP and Microsoft, namely supply chain, IoT, Industry 4.0, which is a low-code AI development platform for autonomous solutions in the industrial control systems area. And that's now available in preview. If you have worked with the low-code AI development platform that's available on the Power Platform, you might have noticed that's really quite powerful, at least what I have seen and experienced up to now. Of course, low-code has limits at some point when it comes to artificial intelligence. That's not to discuss, but as a starter, I think that's quite cool. And as they are heavily investing in the area of, let's say, supply chain and IoT scenarios, I think if you're working in the area, that's definitely worth to take a look at. Then another topic that's quite important from my perspective and that Microsoft is really heavily pushing, I had that already several times on this podcast, is sustainability. And they brought now out a new executive playbook about sustainability, which is more focusing on the target audience of the C-suite, so the C-level executives. And I think that's a good, let's say, area within a company that should be addressed by the topic, because from what I have seen and experienced, it's not on the highest priority list by those folks, but however, it should be, and maybe this playbook gives them, let's say, a gentle push in the right direction, that sustainability makes sense. Okay, then I have one news from the world between SAP and Microsoft, so bridging the gap. That's not application development, but it's about CI/CD pipelines. Building CI/CD pipelines in Azure DevOps with SAP Cloud Foundry. That's a blog post in the SAP community that highlights how to bring things together and how to do the deployment, create the pipelines, making use of GitHub as a code repository. So yeah, it's a nice read. If you want to use Azure DevOps, if you want to make it applicable to your scenario in SAP Cloud Platform, Cloud Foundry environment, or Cloud Foundry runtime, then I think this blog post is definitely quite helpful. Unfortunately, no more topics in the area of SAP Microsoft, so in this world between, crossed my path. I guess now Microsoft and SAP is heavily working on their collaboration. I hope so. So I'm looking forward to news from that area in the near future. Then let's go to the education part, events that come up. There is one thing that I want to highlight. It's also the only thing, and that's Microsoft Ignite. As you might know, Microsoft Ignite is now kind of touring. It's has 2 events, and this is now the second event part of Microsoft Ignite that is taking place at March the 2nd until March the 4th. So it's again a virtual event, and yeah, I think worth to look at and mark in your calendars. So yeah, there's one thing that I did not reference, but I talked about that last week. So next week there is the DSIG Technology Days. So if you have not yet registered, go ahead. 2 days, of course, SAP focused. I think there is one talk or several talks with a little bit of Microsoft touch. So also, if you are in the DSIG, if you're a member of DSIG, I think it's worth to stop there, especially as it's a virtual event, so you can really cherry pick, no traveling. That's one of the rare advantages in these times. Now let's switch to the last area of my podcast, that's developer productivity. I already had a kind of a sneak peek last week or the week before, I don't know. It's out now. Windows Terminal Preview 1.6 release is out with the new feature of a graphical settings UI. I already installed that on my machine. It's working. It's nicer than the JSON file, but don't be afraid. I think as they are not 100% sure that things will work as they should. They back up the JSON files, so no risk for you. If something goes wrong with respect to your settings of your beloved Windows terminal. So yeah, that was it for this week with myNewsWrap. I hope I could present some news for you that is interesting, that makes you want to dig deeper into some areas. With that, I wish you a nice Friday, a nice weekend, and see you next week. Bye.